The forest was alive with the rustle of the wind and the murmur of whispers among the trees. Sasha crouched low, his breathing steady, but his heart pounding like a drumbeat in his chest. The Nazis had arrived in their village months ago, bringing with them fire and death, leaving behind only ash and despair. For Sasha, joining the partisans had been less a choice and more a necessity. Survival was resistance, and resistance was survival. The forest was their home now, a sprawling labyrinth of towering pines, dense undergrowth, and the lingering smell of damp earth. Sasha adjusted the makeshift rifle slung over his shoulder. It had belonged to his father, who had fallen in the first wave of reprisals when the Germans burned their village to the ground. His father had told him stories of resilience, of fighting back against impossible odds. Now Sasha lived those stories, even though he was just 16. Ahead of him, the commander, Ivan, raised a hand, signaling for silence. Ivan was a towering figure, his broad shoulders and thick beard making him seem larger than life. To Sasha, he was both a leader and a father figure, someone who carried the weight of their survival on his shoulders. Beside Ivan, Lena, their scout, moved silently through the foliage, her keen eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the enemy. She had been a schoolteacher before the war, but now she carried grenades in her satchel and a knife strapped to her thigh. The mission was simple but perilous. A German supply train was scheduled to pass through the nearby valley at dawn. If they could sabotage the tracks, it would cripple the enemy's operations in the region. But the Nazis had grown wary of the partisans. Patrols had increased, and traps were everywhere. The group reached the edge of the forest, where the trees thinned out, revealing the railway tracks snaking through the valley below. Ivan gestured for everyone to gather. He spoke in a low voice, his tone calm but commanding. "Lena, take Sasha and scout the tracks. Look for patrols. The rest of us will prepare the explosives." Sasha felt a surge of pride at being entrusted with such a task. Lena nodded, and the two of them slipped away, moving like shadows among the trees. The forest was their ally, its dense canopy shielding them from prying eyes. As they approached the tracks, Sasha's nerves began to fray. He had seen what the Nazis did to those they captured. He pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. Lena crouched beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Look there," she said, pointing to a cluster of bushes near the tracks. "Tripwires. They've set traps." Sasha nodded, his mind racing. He followed Lena's lead, carefully disarming the trap with a pair of wire cutters. They moved further along the tracks, finding more traps and marking the positions for Ivan and the others. When they were satisfied the path was clear, they returned to the group. The night deepened, and the partisans worked swiftly, placing explosives on the tracks. Sasha's hands trembled as he helped secure the charges. Ivan clapped him on the shoulder. "Good work, boy," he said. "Now we wait." The hours dragged on, the silence broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant cry of an owl. Finally, the distant rumble of the train reached their ears. Sasha's heart raced as the sound grew louder, the ground trembling beneath him. Ivan held up a detonator, his finger hovering over the button. The train appeared, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Ivan waited until the engine was directly over the charges before pressing the button. The explosion was deafening, a brilliant flash of light illuminating the forest. The train derailed, cars tumbling off the tracks like toys, flames licking at the wreckage. The partisans didn't have time to celebrate. The explosion would have alerted nearby patrols. "Move!" Ivan barked, leading them back into the forest. They ran, the sounds of their footsteps swallowed by the night. The reprisal came swiftly. The next day, German soldiers stormed a nearby village, rounding up men, women, and children. Sasha watched from the safety of the forest as the soldiers dragged people into the square. A Nazi officer shouted commands, his voice cold and merciless. The villagers were executed, their bodies left as a grim warning. Sasha clenched his fists, tears streaming down his face. Ivan placed a hand on his shoulder. "This is why we fight," he said, "so their sacrifice won't be in vain." The partisans grew bolder in the weeks that followed. They ambushed supply convoys, destroyed bridges, and gathered intelligence for the Soviet forces. But the cost was high. They'd lost comrades, their numbers dwindling with each mission. Sasha watched friends fall, their faces etched in his memory. Winter came, harsh and unrelenting. The forest offered little protection against the biting cold. The partisans huddled around makeshift fires, their breath visible in the frigid air. Food was scarce, and hunger gnawed at their resolve. Yet they endured, drawing strength from their shared purpose. One night, as snow fell gently on the forest, Sasha sat beside Lena, staring into the flames. "Do you think we'll ever see peace again?" he asked. Lena smiled faintly, her eyes distant. "We have to believe we will," she said. "Otherwise, what's the point of all this?" Their bond grew stronger, forged in the crucible of war. Sasha found himself looking to Lena for guidance, her strength and wisdom a beacon in the darkness. The final act of their story came in the spring, when Soviet forces launched a major offensive to liberate Belarus. The partisans played a crucial role, sabotaging German communications and providing vital intelligence. Sasha fought alongside Ivan and Lena in a climactic battle, the forest echoing with the sounds of gunfire and explosions. When the smoke cleared, the Nazis were in retreat. The partisans emerged from the forest, battered but victorious. Sasha stood among them, his rifle in hand, his heart heavy with the weight of their sacrifices. The war was not yet over, but for the first time, Sasha felt a glimmer of hope. The forest had been their sanctuary and their battleground, a place where they had forged bonds of unbreakable solidarity. Through fire and fury, they had endured, proving that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit could prevail. As the sun rose over the forest, Sasha looked to the horizon, ready to face whatever came next.